Afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar today. My name is Anna D'Angelo. I'm the Director of Technology and Leadership at AfPA, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this third and last webinar on the cutter reduction strategies. On behalf of the presenters, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders, both past and present. I also extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. For those of you that were not part of the previous sessions of this series, I would like to just provide a very quick overview about the purpose of these webinars. So the webinars have been prepared by with the AfPA Surfacing Committee, and I would like to thank them all for their support. And the purpose of this webinar series is to talk about the current spray sealing practices and alternative techniques to using cutters in spread seals. And many thanks, Adam. Adam Leslie is the lead advisor of payments, Office of the Chief Engineer Program and Standards in New Zealand for NZTA. So thank you for joining us, and handing over to you now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anna. And so today I'm just going to give a wee bit of background as to a piece of work that's taken a wee while for us to get through, but this is a transitional piece that we've made moving from hot cutback bitumen to emulsion. So just a wee bit of context in the New Zealand space for everyone's benefit. Over here we do roughly 120,000 tonnes of cutback and emulsion sealing annually, and traditionally we would be sitting at around about the 10 to 20% emulsion mark, with the balance made up of hot cutback bitumen. Now, the conversation around increasing emulsion uptake has been around for a very long time. The conversation dates back to around the 80s. There's been a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion and research into what moving the benchmark of emulsion percentages would look like for New Zealand. And it's been a very incremental shift over that time. We have had some of our RCAs, that's our local authorities, that have moved up some of their contracts to emulsion-only contracts, as well as some of our suppliers over in New Zealand have made the move themselves to only sealing with emulsions as well. So a lot of conversation and a bit of a piecemeal approach being taken from sector was the way in which we were typically operating. So why did we suddenly change? If we've been talking about this for a few decades, why the sudden motivation to do something about it? And as with quite a number of things, the answer lies in law. So there was a new piece of legislation that came out, the Health and Safety at Work Act in 2015, and that placed upon us a legal obligation to take reasonably practicable action against managing risks. While we were looking at this, we also realised that it was pretty well aligned with some organisational positions, one being that it's unacceptable for anyone to be killed or seriously injured while travelling or working on the land transport system. And so it looked like it was about time to take a more active approach into what this may look like. The first thing we really needed to look at, though, was that practicable wording within the legislation. So we needed to understand whether emulsions were actually of a safety benefit over hot cutback bitumen. So there was a piece of research that was undertaken, or several pieces of research that was wrapped up in 2019 that did look at incident rates from using hot cutback bitumen and emulsion. It's worth noting that there was no easy process for obtaining this information. It wasn't stored in a nice, easy database for the researchers to go and query and get the responses out of. They did actually have to go away and survey our suppliers. So it's not a easily repeatable process, and unfortunately that still hasn't changed. But what we saw from the information, so this was data over a 10-year period from 2009 to 2019, and what we could see is that the incident frequency was similar between using cutback bitumen and using emulsion, but certainly there was a reduction in that incident severity. So we weren't seeing the fatalities or the serious harm incidents that you were seeing with cutback when people were using emulsion seals. So with that landed, we were quite clear in the fact that an emulsion was an available, practicable alternative material, and it was a safer alternative material. So we needed to understand, were there any other benefits, were there any other barriers, what was the hold up that had stopped us from making this transition. And so another piece of research was undertaken to look at what the implications would be, and it did bring a number of points up that needed to be addressed. First and foremost was the cost. So over here there's around about a 15% price premium for using an emulsion over a hot cutback. Secondly was capacity. There was a limited number of emulsion plants in New Zealand, and they were not well distributed, so there was identified some regions that wouldn't be easily serviceable by the existing emulsion plants. Because our sector had arranged itself around cutback bitumen delivery, there was concern noted around issues with staff training and competency requirements if we were to make a shift to emulsion and the different methodologies and the different materials that people would be working with. The researchers also looked at the relative performance differences between cutback and emulsion, as well as any potential restrictions where there may be issues with sealing with emulsion. So that's things like high-grade sites or sites where there was sensitive environmental areas adjacent to it. And then there were some other noted issues as well around the environmental and the sustainability pieces. So wash-off was one of the ones that was concerned about from an environmental perspective, and sustainability. There was talk about the sustainability benefits from a carbon perspective, but there was noted within the research that moving purely to an emulsion may have implications on other processes. So namely, we don't do a lot of crumb rubber. We don't do any crumb rubber sealing over here at the moment, but it was noted within the research that if we do move to an emulsion, it's going to make it incredibly difficult to then have crumb rubber sealing as an available option to us in the future. And so we needed to look through all of those concerns that were noted. We know that there are benefits for emulsion from the health and safety perspective especially, as well as those technical and environmental benefits that can be made. As far as the status quo goes, typically the clients in New Zealand at the moment were only looking at residual bitumen. The delivery system itself wasn't specified. The expectation was really that the contractors would be incentivized to utilize the best product available to them to meet the contractual requirements. And so while an emulsion was an acceptable solution, we were still in a situation where our suppliers were adopting cutback for the majority of the sealing works. And so the issue we were seeing is that this incentivization, the health and safety benefits, the technical benefits, was not enough to guarantee that we're going to get what we want. In this case, the commercial drivers, that 15% price premium was outbalancing the incentives for emulsion. And so we needed to do something a bit more robust than incentivize if we really wanted to make a shift for sector. And so from Waka Kotahi's perspective, we had a really big desire to level the playing field and get rid of those commercial barriers to make sure that it's not impeding the right outcome for sector. The benefits were generally well acknowledged, but there were different approaches being taken by different contractors as well as our different local authorities. And so what we're seeing is that if it was left to the individuals, they'd have their own views on what an acceptable risk profile was when balancing the costs against the health and safety benefits, and so we were getting different outcomes. To address this, the decision was made by Waka Kotahi to take a much more active approach in selecting the bitumen delivery system, and so the decision was to mandate the use of emulsions over cutback and embed that requirement into future contracts. The move was in response to industry, so that's quite an important thing to note. It wasn't just NZTA deciding to do this for all of New Zealand. It was something that industry had come to us to talk to us about because there was a general desire for them to be able to do the right thing, and they just were seeing that if they were to move to emulsions, they'd be disadvantaged at that tender box if they were pricing for that additional cost. It's also worth noting that this is a big shift for Aotearoa New Zealand. It's been discussed, like I said, over a very long period of time. And so it's a big change for the way in which we operate here, but it's worth just putting that into the global perspective. It's not out of scope of the world stage. There's plenty of other jurisdictions around the world that are using more emulsions than they would cut back. And one of the good examples that was raised was Highways England, which is predominantly emulsion based, and they've got similar conditions and similar environments to what we've got over in New Zealand. So how did we go about doing this? First and foremost, it was agreed, like I said, between sector and NZTA. It went up to our board of NZTA to endorse this move. So it was given one of the highest levels of endorsement around. And essentially what we've done is back in 2021, we released a technical advice note. And at that stage, it noted that from the 1st of July 2024, all new contracts would specify bitumen emulsions. And we'd have a look at what would happen between the 21 and 24 period. Now, there was a few reasons for why we didn't want to make a change straight away. We wanted this transitional period to come about. We firstly didn't want to try and force variations into contracts, some of the uncertainty that can come about by doing that, as well as obviously the cost issues. But we did want to send a signal really nice and clearly to sector and to New Zealand that we are making this change. We wanted to provide them that confidence that they could go away and invest in the emulsion technologies, invest in the plant that will be needed, and position themselves for the future. And it was quite deliberately done so that it also aligned with our next funding round. So the 2024 period that we've just entered into is the start of our 3-year funding block. And so what are we doing at the moment? Well, we quite quickly realised that because we had never specified the delivery systems before, we didn't actually have an emulsion specification for NZTA. So we went away and we developed NZTA M02, which is our new bitumen emulsion specification. And that's a very high level specification. It's just there to enable us to define what we mean by bitumen emulsion when we are specifying it within contract. We're also working with industry and our National Surfacings Technical Group, so that's an industry body that makes up a large proportion of the technical expertise within sealing and surfacings in New Zealand. And we're looking at what the training and the safety precautions and the best practices are that will need to be developed while we manage this move. We're working in with our local authorities as well to promote this change. So the change is mandatory only for our state highways and our new state highway contracts. But obviously the best case scenario would be if we could move all at once as New Zealand as a whole. This would obviously take a bit of a harmonised approach, give us the benefits of scales of economy, maximising fleet efficiency and the way in which we're handling our plant. And so this is all very new. It's only kicked in a few months ago. We haven't had any significant long-term contracts come out of it just yet. So we are still managing our way through the transitional period. Like I said, we've done it quite deliberately so that it's not an overnight shift, giving everyone plenty of time to prepare themselves. And we're going to continue the discussions with our local authority funding partners, as well as with sector and our technical groups within New Zealand to manage the shift over the next few years. I'd just really like to wrap up by saying I know this webinar series is all about cutter reduction. That wasn't the primary driver for what we've done in this shift for emulsions. It was primarily because of health and safety reasons, but we did note through the process as well the environmental and the technical benefits that we will be able to see by utilising an emulsion delivery system for our sealing works here as well. The change is from 1st of July. It's timed well within our funding periods, but it's also timing it well within our maintenance contracts, which are coming up all for renewal in a couple of years as well. So that timing matter is quite critical to land right, get everyone the warning they need so that the sector can prepare and then transition over a period of time so that we can manage the risks with the transitional issues that can occur. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. That was great. I'm sure there will be lots of questions. So just a reminder for all of you to type your question in the chat box, and I will read it at the end after my presentation that I'm going to share right now. Okay, so I thought since this is the last webinar that concludes the webinar series on the cutter reduction strategies and the AfPA roadmap, I just give you again a summary of what we had discussed, also for the benefit of those people who couldn't attend the previous two, and then share what is next. So starting from a summary. So we have discussed and explored what cutters are. We have looked at the safety and environmental consideration related with the use of hydrocarbon cutters. Why we look at the why we're still using cutters in spray sealing, and also investigated the new technologies and products in use in Australia. Today we heard about the projects underway and in some cases the NACOE project completed and the implementation of solutions. And then we'll talk about the pathways to the elimination of cutters. And we also heard from Adam the approach in New Zealand. So just a reminder about why we did start all of this. We have dedicated time to review the current practices in the use of, because the use of cutters does present some safety and environmental concerns. Cutting back bitumen for spread sealing requires the addition of kerosene type hydrocarbons, so high temperature, and so there are risks of explosions to the hot volatile vapors, but also risk of burns, considering the high temperatures. From an environmental point of view, of course, we do have CO2 emissions, but also these non-methane volatile organic compounds, which are potent greenhouse gases and contribute to the formation of photochemical smog. So you see in the photo that I took from the New Zealand chip sealing book, where approximately 20% of the kerosene evaporated while being sprayed, 30% within 2 hours following application. So I'm sure you all know why we use cutters. Again, this was shared in the first webinar, and I would invite you to, if you didn't have the chance to follow the webinar to go on the AfPA website where you've got all the slides and recordings available. What I want to add for this slide is just that the use of cutters requires judgment and experience combined with good practice. And so that's the, I think, important message that we wanted also to convey through this webinar. Again, we discussed how to ensure best practice in spray sealing to reduce the cutters. Well, and again, you see here, this is a slide that I took from the first webinar where we suggested and recommended to carry out reseals in summer when ambient temperature are high, and then when sprayed the S15R, which is the crumb rubber bitumen, to adopt some strategies like use a larger nozzles, increase the temperature, reduce the bar width to achieve uniform pressure, but also minimize the window between spraying and spreading the aggregate. And we see, for example, the sprayer and spreader combi machine. Use the pre-coated aggregates and the addition agents in the binder, and also ensure that the practices in the operational is thought through, and that there are enough rollers to ensure enough roller passes. So we had, as I mentioned before, in the second webinar, we have explored the alternative techniques and products that are already available in Australia. And I refer here to the use of the synchronized sprayer and spreaders that will improve the aggregate wetting and in instantaneous aggregate spreading. We talked about the low viscosity crumb rubber bitumen. We mentioned about the high flood emulsion, or someone might refer to the thixotropic emulsion. Some in New Zealand might refer to that as well. And then bio-based primes and pre-coating fluids. So I already shared the AfPA roadmap, the reasons why we started to work on this project, and this went on from the 2021 to now, and we set up a goal, which is to, by the end of 2025, to conduct at least 50% of spread sealing with alternative techniques or alternative products. Now, where are we at? Where are we at with this plan, with this goal? Well, I can share and tell you that we've done in these few years quite a lot of activities within AfPA, and again, thanks to all the members, especially from the surfacing committee, that have highly supported all these activities. First of all, education and uplift of knowledge across industry. And this is also, I mean, running these webinars is also an example of how we can share information to a wider audience. We have drafted and published an advisory note, the advisory note 27, which provides the overview on, how we can reduce the use of cutters in spray sealing, and giving the alternative techniques and products. And I'm going to touch base on that in the next slide. We are also working with the Ostro's BSTG, the surfacing technical group, to review the AfPA and Ostro's work tips 14 and 27, which are old, but also refer to a very high cutter rates, which are no longer representing the current practices. So this is still under revision. And then also, I think what is very important within AfPA, and again in collaboration with the surfacing committee, we have decided to start tracking the use of cutters, the cutters usage, and And essentially, from the conversation, and we have today a few members of the surfacing committee, so maybe later during the Q&A, we can talk a little bit more about it. We have started to track the use of cutters, and the general feedback is that there have been, and still is, a progressive reduction on the use of cutters. And so we will keep monitoring how it goes, and so that at the end of 2025, we can say, yes, we have achieved our goal. Fingers crossed. Now, touching on the advisory note 27, I put here the barcode so you can scan it. I will leave it up there so you can scan and you get access to the advisory note. As I said, advisory note, I'm not going to go into the details. You can read it at your own time. But essentially, I would just want to mention the headlines. So first of all, we talk about alternative products. So as you heard from Adam, bitumen emulsion can be a safer alternative to cutting hot binders. And then depending on the traffic, they could be, more appropriate or suitable to use PMB emulsion or S15R. Alternative methods, we spend a lot of time on that, synchronized sprayer and spreader. Alternative cutters, so if you need cutters, well, there is the option of using bike cutters. And then also a reminder that there are also alternative surfacing types that can be used when maybe the spray sealing option is not the most appropriate. And so I just mentioned a few capped seals and micro surfacing. So where to next? So we recommend, and we're very happy to hear from Mike that there would be other projects. Ideally, it would be great to conduct trials within existing projects so that we can have perhaps a tank load and then just run through an existing project. But also, I think very importantly now is to assess the sustainability of spray sealing practices in a project. And so it is really important to conduct an RCA to assess the environmental impacts of typical spray sealing practices, and also compare the environmental impacts and life cycle costs to alternative processes. Now, I'm not gonna spend much time here. I need to just finish because otherwise we don't have time for the Q&A. But essentially, this is my last slide. I just want to, is a reminder, cutters should not be used as an insurance against poor workmanship. And again, good practices will well maintain equipment. So I'm just closing my presentation here, but I want to, first of all, thanks the presenter today. Thank again the surfacing committee, and then I will stop sharing my screen, or maybe I leave my screen on, but then I'll look at the question. So I do have a bit of questions, so let's have a look. There is a question for Adam. So great to see NZTA recognizing its responsibility as a PCPU and enabling contractors to keep their teams safe by removing cost barriers. What was the key learning from New Zealand that we could apply in Australia, given the similar health and safety legislation in both countries? That's a great question, Darcy. Thank you.
That is a fantastic question, Darcy. Look, I'm pretty sure physics and health and safety and etc. is the same in New Zealand as it is in Australia. So I think the main learning, as I emphasised a couple of times, this has been discussed in New Zealand for a long time. We've talked a lot about how good emulsion can be and the fact that it can offer these benefits. The learning that I would really say is that it needs that leadership from the client organisations to make the change. As I've said, incentivisation doesn't often end up where we want it to get to. And so the real drive behind this change was the fact that sector came to NZTA and NZTA agreed there needed to be a firm position taken, and we're that mandating the requirement to use emulsion as opposed to trying to incentivize people. That's really what's driven this to be able to be enabled.
Thank you. And then we can maybe, we might be able to hear from other people if they want to comment on this question as well. Now there is a question, from Sean, and I guess it is again for Adam, which I lost it now. Oh yeah, it is. So has there been a significant shift in specification or seal performance expectations with changing to emulsion use only?
I think the biggest change was we had to develop a new specification because we didn't have one for emulsion. So yes, there's been a wee bit of a change there. As far as performance goes, the research that was provided to us was essentially no difference in performance should be expected. Depends on who you necessarily talk to, whether they believe there can be some performance gains from emulsion or some disbenefits from emulsion, but it was at best inconclusive either way. So we're not expecting a change in performance.
Again for you, Adam. So you're now gonna get bombarded by questions. Following on what we were talking about before from the question from Darcy. So there is an additional one that says that I'd like to know what extra protocols or mitigation methods are in place for the extended curing times and potential safety effects of loose stones.
This is that piece that I mentioned around staff skills and competency, right? So it is a change. As I mentioned, there are some of our suppliers that have been using emulsions for years anyway, but that was raised as a concern that people that have been primarily using cutbacks will be unaware or less aware of some of the risks that can come around with that. And that's why we're working in with sector to look at those best practice guidelines for sector so that they are made aware and are effectively managing those construction risks.
Perfect, thank you. So just going through some of these. Again, Adam, since you are now on the spot, last question for now is about, you spoke about this mandate to emulsion that then became effective 1st of July. So does this mean that now emulsion will replace just cutback binders or all hot binders?
The move that we're making is to use emulsions for all of our sealing works.
Okay, so the hot bitumen and cutback bitumen will all be replaced by emulsions. Perfect. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Now, there are a lot of questions here which are all around Mike and Narelle around that low viscosity chrome rubber. And so someone asked the spray temperature and pavement temperature during the trial. And I see Claire replied 190. Do you want to give us, Mike or Narelle, some more information around that? Because also I read from someone various temperatures were trialed, and these are shown in the report. So maybe, do you want to touch on that, please?
Yeah, look, there were a few different temperatures as we had on the slide there. The various conditions of the existing pavement were recorded as well as the pavement and spraying temperatures. So I think probably it'd be best just to refer to the report when it comes out, but we do have that detail.
And also, Mike, there was a question about binder application. What sort of binder application was used?
The spray rates?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Claire did provide a response for the particular example I had there was 1.7.
Oh, yeah, sorry,
meters.
yes. Yeah, 1.7 litre per square meter. Okay,
Yeah, so
it.
that's just an example, but yeah.
Okay. Now I got the last question from Lyle. What are the maximum traffic volumes, including heavies and pavement temperature you are dealing with in New Zealand?
Well, I don't know the maximum temperatures. Sorry.
But it would be colder than in Brisbane.
I mean, certainly colder than what you're dealing with over in Australia. I mean, we do have a range being a long, skinny north to south, a couple of islands. So there is a range of temperatures that we deal with, which is addressed through our specifications.
Maybe Adam, we'll find out and then send a response to this question.
Yeah.
How does it sound? All right. Okay. Okay, I don't have any more questions. Is there anyone who wants to ask something? Otherwise, I can just let me go through. No, I don't have any further questions. So clearly there was the presentation was very clear. So thank you for that. All right. So again, I'm going to close it now. Thanking again the presenters and all of you for turning up and to attend this webinar. These slides will be available on the AfPA website. And again, Claire, too late. I'll reply to your question in another in an email. So again, thanks again for joining, and this concludes the 3 webinars under the carbon reduction strategies. And please watch this space because there will be other events and other webinars. Have a great day and see you soon. Bye.